Hello, Revere, and welcome to the Revere Veterans and Community Show. Today I have a real special guest. His name is Gregory White. He's the Chief of Staff and General Counsel of Consumer Affairs.
Yes.
Welcome, Gregory, to the show.
Thanks for having me,
And
Morris.
it's a pleasure for you to take the time off to come and join us.
Well, happy to do so.
Okay. I got onto the computer and I have questions I would like to ask you because I don't know 9/10 of them.
Sure.
So I would like to start off what they call an overview of agency.
Sure. I'm with the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation, and a lot of folks think Consumer Affairs, that must be the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office does have a Consumer Protection Bureau. That's a big part of what they do, but we're a separate independent agency. And as such, we oversee 5 regulatory agencies as well as having our own mandates within the Office of Consumer Affairs. In addition to having our own mandates, we oversee the Division of Banks. The Division of Banks is the state regulator for all state-chartered banks and credit unions. They regulate mortgage loan companies as well as debt collectors, amongst other things. And they have bank examiners that go in and conduct the examinations and handle it accordingly. In addition to that, we have the Division of Insurance. The Division of Insurance oversees health care, as well as property insurance and auto insurance, amongst other things. We have the Division of Standards, which a lot of folks are aware of what they do. They're not certain as to who's responsible for it. But if you go to a gas pump and you pull up, you're going to see a sticker on the side of it. And it's an inspection sticker. And unless it's a town weights and measures inspector, it's been done by the Division of Standards. So their mandate, if you will, is to go out and inspect all the gas pumps throughout the Commonwealth that they have jurisdiction over. In addition to that, they inspect fuel delivery trucks. They're charged with the responsibility of checking scanners at grocery stores, auctioneers, and they license auto body shops.
Right, can I ask you a couple
Sure.
of questions?
Yeah.
On the gas pumps, do you ever get it where it says like 2 gallons, 3 gallons, but it's not 2 or 3 gallons?
Well, that's what they're responsible for ensuring, to make sure that what is being advertised is in fact going into your pump. So that's the reason why they oversee it, because they oversee weights and measures. They oversee the scales at airports. Recently, this past year, we conducted a action, if you will, involving the city of Boston and Logan airports to make sure that when you're going in and having your bags weighed, in fact, that the scale is in fact accurate, so you're not being overcharged. So anything to do with weights and measures, that falls under the Division of Standards. Then we have the Division of Professional Licensors. They're charged with the responsibility of overseeing 375,000 tradespeople in Massachusetts, from veterinarians to psychologists to masseuse, sheet metal workers, electricians, a broad mandate, and they're charged with licensing them and having a complaint process, amongst other things. And then lastly, we have the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, which regulates the telecommunications and cable industry.
One question I was going to ask you, well, you mentioned before on the banks where they have to debit credit, people loan money, and people, how would you say it? A creditor calls them up to collect it.
A debt collector.
A debt collector. How do you know if the debt collector is a legal one when he calls?
Because you can check with the Division of Banks. They're required to be licensed through the Division of Banks.
Oh.
There's some exceptions to that. If you're a licensed attorney, you're not required to do so. But if you're involved in debt collecting in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you're required to be licensed through the Division of Banks, and they can, in fact, tell you if who's ever calling you is, in fact, properly licensed.
Okay, so if someone calls you from out of state, you must almost be sure it's a scam.
Well, now, there's reciprocity, but, again, when in doubt, you can check with the Division of Banks.
Okie dokie. Number 2. I'm glad you're here.
That's okay. I was going to talk specifically about some of the programs we have within the
Please
Office of
do.
Consumer Affairs. We have the lemon law arbitration program. If you've been aggrieved by buying a new or a pre-owned vehicle, you can file with the lemon law arbitration program. We have the do not call list.
Excuse me, on the lemon law,
Sure.
how many days roughly do you have?
Well, there's specific criteria depending upon whether or not it's new or used.
okay.
And one of the things I wanted to mention, Morris, is that we man a 1-800 hotline. We have 4 Northeastern co-op students who work in 6-month increments.
Oh, I
and
see.
they're there from Monday through Friday. I will provide the number. I can provide it now. It's 1-888-283-3757. So if you have any specific questions in terms of, they're not lawyers, but if you have any specific questions, they can either answer your question or direct you to the appropriate agency.
Oh, that's from Northeastern University?
They're from Northeastern University.
school.
Yeah, very good school, and we have a great group of students this semester. In addition to that, we have the data breach, and basically it mandates that if an entity is a victim of a data breach, they're required to notify the Office of Consumer Affairs. The number of Massachusetts residents that have had information compromised, the type of breach, and what steps they've taken to correct that. In addition to that, they notify the Attorney General's office. And lastly, we oversee the Home Improvement Contracting and Guaranteed Fund program. And the way that works is that if you're having work done on your home,
Right.
and when you think about it, Morris, one of the biggest assets that an individual has is their home. And rarely can you have any type of home improvement contracting work done that's not going to cost you several $1,000s. In Massachusetts, if you're doing home improvement contracting work, with a few exceptions, you're required to be registered through our office. You register, that registration is good for 2 years, and you pay a fee into the guaranteed fund, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
I was going to ask you, some people come over, like even to my house, we'd like to do this for you, we'd like to
Yep.
do this for you. I don't even know who they are.
Exactly, and we advise consumers, before you undertake any work, first off, ensure that they're properly registered, and you can contact our office. You can go online and you can retrieve that information. We maintain a list of contractors that are registered in Massachusetts. We also maintain a list of contractors who are not registered or who in fact have had complaints registered against them with our office. So we advise consumers that before they enter into any agreement, and that agreement for the most part should be in writing, it should be with a registered contractor. Because if at the end of the day that contractor does shoddy work or
Right.
takes your money and doesn't come back to do the work, provided you meet the criteria, you can file with a guaranteed fund. And if the criteria is met, you can recoup potentially up to $10,000 on your claim through the guaranteed fund. And that's what the fee that contractors pay to fund. It's called the guaranteed fund.
That's a legitimate contractors pay the guarantee. for.
Exactly, and if in fact, that you raise a good point, Morris, because if in fact you're not properly registered, that will preclude you from filing with a guaranteed fund. So it has to be a registered contractor in Massachusetts. And let me also say that the majority of contractors who are out there are doing great work. They're in it for the right reasons. But like in any profession, you have, the old saying, good apples and bad apples.
Right.
And unfortunately, because the nature of the work can be very costly, if in fact you are aggrieved by the project, it could result in a lot of money lost on your part.
Right. I was going to ask you this here. Like in the local towns, when a contractor does the work, he has to get a building permit.
Right. Yeah, and I know what you're going to say.
Right.
In fact, we've been working with town building inspectors across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and advising them that before they issue any permit, that they make sure in fact,
licensed.
that the individual is registered, not licensed. It's a registration. And we've gotten some great success. We've had individuals who owed the Commonwealth thousands of dollars and hadn't paid any of the monies come in because they went to pull a permit, and the building inspector wouldn't provide one because they weren't properly registered. So we're working with all the communities out there. In addition to that, we're working with the Attorney General's office and the local District Attorney's office. My background before I came on board years ago was as a prosecutor in Massachusetts in 3 counties. And so we're working with various district attorneys' offices throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because failure to be properly registered is a crime in Massachusetts. It's a misdemeanor punishable by up to a period in the House of Correction. So we've had some success going after these rogue contractors. Those are the individuals who continue to prey on consumers, owe the Commonwealth thousands of dollars in terms of payments out of the guaranteed fund, and have failed to reimburse it.
Right, Greg. I just want to ask you this question. A contractor could be registered in the Commonwealth, but he doesn't have to be licensed.
No,
no,
you're partial. You're
half and half.
Half and half. Okay. You have to be registered for the most part, unless you the total revenue from a year falls under a certain amount. You're a college student, or you're doing certain work like interior painting. You don't need to be registered.
Oh, I see.
A lot of, although if you're doing exterior painting, you are required to be registered.
Okay.
This past summer, my wife and I, we live in Central Mass, had our house painted. And I had about a half a dozen contractors give me a quote. Most of them had been...
Can I ask you before
Sure.
you continue? What's a good idea to get a bid? Because some people don't know. Like, how many contractors should you usually ask?
Rule of thumb, I don't go with any less than 3. I think more is better. You can go crazy getting too many.
What means a short trip?
Right. But at the end of the day, when we had these contractors come and give us a quote, none of them were registered. And I don't think there was any ill intent on their part. So, most of them, as I said, have been doing business 20, 25 years, had great reputations. They just didn't know that they were required to be registered. They had all the right permits and in the workers' comp and unemployment insurance for their workers, but they weren't properly registered. There are individuals who are doing home improvement contracting that are required to have their CSL, which is a license through the Department of Public Safety, and that requires training and certain criteria to be met before you're issued that license. But we don't issue a license, we issue a registration. It doesn't guarantee that the person who's performing the work is in fact qualified. You should vet them out.
It's up to you, right?
You should get references and track them down. But what it does provide is a level of protection. Should they perform shoddy work or fail to return, provided the criteria is met, you potentially could recoup up to $10,000. And in addition to the guaranteed fund, we also have the home improvement contracting complaint process. Because in fact you have been aggrieved by a contract, you can file a complaint with the Office of Consumer Affairs. We have hearing officers who conduct hearings. They can dismiss the complaint, or they can fine the contractor. They can suspend their registration or revoke their registration.
And also notify the Better Business Bureau too in that case?
We don't do that, but we recommend that the consumer, absolutely, absolutely. So that's one of the biggest programs that we have that we're administering, and we're going to be initiating a public awareness campaign this spring, letting consumers and contractors know about their rights and responsibilities. So those are the programs within the Office of Consumer Affairs. But I can see over your hand, and I know what your next question is.
Well, it comes off here. We just typed it.
Right.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, because we have this 1-800 number, we have calls coming in on a daily basis with complaints, with inquiries, seeking information. And I'd like to talk about some of the types of identity thefts that we're seeing or fielding quite a few phone calls on. The first one is, the data breach where someone hacks into your system. Years ago when I was a young prosecutor, in fact, I began my career doing an internship through the law school at the old Chelsea courthouse, where the courthouse was on the second floor and the police station was on the first floor. Well, back then in the 80s, identity fraud for the most part consisted of, you lost your wallet, someone grabbed your credit cards and your money, what have you, and your personal information. Now in this day and age, people don't even have to leave their home and get access to personal information. And so what we advise consumers is that, use common sense. When you have a password, you should change it periodically. You should make sure that the word or the numerals that are part of your password cannot easily be associated with you. And mix it up from time to time. Not too long ago, my brother lives in Europe, and I got an email from him saying you need to change your password because your system's been hacked. So I went from a one-word password that was easily associated with me to 5 digits followed by 2 words that weren't associated with me. And last fall, my son and I were running in a half marathon, and just before the gun went off, I was trying to access my iTunes on the cell phone, and it was asking for my password. So I turned to my son and I said, "Why don't you put it in?" And by the time we got the whole password in, the gun went off and all these runners went by us. But I can tell you that it's going to be very difficult to hack into my system.
Well, what I did with mine, and I have no bones about saying it, I'm not going to tell them the password, is I used a letter and a number, a letter and a number, a letter and a number, unless they know exactly out of the numbers, because you had to get billions of things.
Absolutely.
It's going to be tough to figure it out.
Exactly. And so, again, something that's not easily associated with you and that you change from time to time. The other common types of identity theft that we're seeing is through a practice called dumpster diving. Have you heard of that?
Never heard of that.
Basically what they'll do is they'll go through your trash. And people, it's amazing what they'll throw out. Old tax returns with social security numbers on it, dates of birth, various information, bills, and they'll literally go through your trash. So we advise consumers to invest in a paper shredder and shred your documents before throwing it in the trash.
Right.
And go ahead.
I was going to ask you, I was looking over the computer and I see these beautiful photographs.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on those?
Yeah, and I'm about to go into the third one, which is the skimming devices that you and I were talking about earlier before the show. We're seeing these devices show up in quite a few different types of venues. They're showing up in gas pumps. They're showing up at ATM machines. They're showing up at a train station and malls and bus stations, and they utilize.
You mean when you put your card on the computer rail like this, they can track it?
Well, they can. They devices at department stores. We found them on those. We have recently a credit union in the South Shore, just prior to Christmas. They had placed a skimming device on the ATM machine, and we had gone through these earlier, but they are basically what they'll do is they'll put a plastic facade over where the credit card goes in, and behind that is the skimming device. And
how do they get in behind that, though?
They'll pry open the system and put the device in, or it will be self-contained. On gas pumps, they will actually open the door and get inside the interior of the gas pump and put these skimming devices on. And what we advise consumers to do, as well as proprietors of gas stations, is to be somewhat vigilant in that look at the device. We have, most of our pumps have these tamper evidence seals that are placed on.
That's the very
exactly. And if it's been removed or tampered with and you're a consumer, you should notify the proprietor. Because what they're doing is they're accessing individuals' credit card information and sending it throughout the world. Recently, the Office of Consumer Affairs conducted a cybersecurity conference in Central Mass, and we had, amongst other individuals speaking, the FBI and the Secret Service. And the FBI agent from the Boston office was telling us about an investigation in upstate New York. It was a mom and pop gas station in a high tourist area, and they had put these devices throughout the gas station.
The mom and pops did that, or somebody else did?
No, someone else did that, yeah, and the proprietors were unaware of it. As I said to you before the show, they've become very sophisticated, because in the past, when the FBI became aware that these devices were located, they would stake out the station, wait for the individual to show up to retrieve the skimming device. Now they're all utilized by Bluetooth, so they don't even have to come back and retrieve the device. It's cost of doing business. But in this particular case, they had retrieved thousands of pieces of information. They had sent it out throughout the world, and they notified the recipients that don't release this information until you're given the specific date and time, at which point they gave them the green light, and within hours, millions of dollars were lost. So it's becoming a very high priority for the Office of Consumer Affairs. Our inspectors work with the local authorities, the FBI and the Secret Service. We found them in Norfolk County recently. We found them out in Middlesex County and Worcester County on gas pumps. So what we tell consumers, if you come across a device, just notify the local law enforcement, because there could be forensic evidence that you don't want to compromise.
I was going to ask you a question, if
Sure.
I may.
Yeah.
In the supermarket, if people carry their credit cards in
Yeah.
their wallet. There's a way even to get that info?
It is. What they'll do is they'll rub up against you with a skimming device, and we just came out with these protective sleeves. And what you do is you put your credit card in there, and it protects them from gathering the information. In fact, I brought these for you.
Oh, thank you.
Morris. And in addition to
Could
that,
you hold it up and show it to
sure.
them?
Yeah, it's a protective sleeve. Your credit card goes inside that, and it protects them from downloading your information.
Now, let me ask you, what's on there that keeps them from getting it? Because if they're smart enough to do it before that was invented, they might be smart enough to try to circumvent that.
Well, whatever it is, it works. It works. I'm
Oh,
not
it
sure.
does
I'm not sure what it consists of, but they're very effective. And the other protective sleeve, and I brought you a few of these, is for passports. Since 2007. There's a chip in everyone's passport containing all your information. And what they'll do is they'll rub up against you and they'll download your information. So by having these passport protective sleeves, it protects the information on your passport. So those are some of the
That's fantastic.
most common type of skimming devices that our office is routinely seeing, and we're working closely with the Attorney General's office and the District Attorney's office to combat it.
You know, being a senior citizen myself and
Yep.
being at the Revere Senior Center, we have a lot of seniors that go overseas during the summer
Sure.
or the fall. And of course, they got to have their passports.
Yep.
So you would recommend that every senior citizen have one of these?
I think it's
Everyone that goes overseas should
it
have one.
it certainly can be helpful.
And you could buy these anywhere?
You can get them online,
Oh,
you know.
and what do you call these, if I may ask?
They're skimming device protective sleeves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So-
you. Thank you.
And that leads us to the final area that you and I talked about before the show that you had asked me about, which is the most common types of identity theft.
That's right.
And you and I shared some stories back and forth. Our students field numerous calls, and one that has been out there for years that you would think that everyone would be aware of it is the Irs scam. You know,
Right. The
you
one
and
from
I-
Washington State.
in Washington State, you know. Recently, some of the employees at the Office of Consumer Affairs had come to me, and one woman in particular said, my mother, who lives in Chelsea, had been receiving over a dozen phone calls a day harassing her, and we tracked them back to the state of Washington. They use profanity. They're brazen. They,
Oh, yeah.
you know, they called and they try to be
Put you
professional.
in jail, too.
Yeah, they try to be professional up front. They say, you know, we're calling with the Internal Revenue Service. You're subject to criminal prosecution. You need to wire usually $5,000, $10,000 in order to avoid criminal prosecution.
Right.
And
Ray, excuse me, I got to say one thing.
Sure.
We only got about 2.5 minutes
Okay,
left.
sure.
Let me give you a minute and 3/4. So
Okay.
just leave me 45 seconds.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So we tell people, listen, the IRS doesn't make phone calls. When in doubt, contact the IRS. The other is a grandparent scam, in which individuals find out personal information about.
I never heard that one.
Yeah, what they'll do is they'll find that your granddaughter's studying abroad in Paris, and she's at this university, and they know their name, and they can get all this information off
Right.
Facebook. And they'll call and say that they've been detained by the local authorities and you need to wire $5,000 to post their bond. The grandparent gets concerned, and
Right.
next thing they know, they're wiring the money, and that money's lost forever. So when in doubt, contact the local jurisdiction. And then lastly, the one-ring scam that we talked about briefly. What they'll do is they will call your cell phone, let it ring once, and hang up. You will miss the call. You're curious as to what you don't recognize the number. You call back. It's usually in the Caribbean, and they'll keep you on the phone. The longer they keep you on the phone, the more costly it
Information
will
they
be.
get.
More costly it will be. So.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So those are the. And then the fake lottery scam, which has been around for years, but unfortunately people are still being victimized by it.
Right. So, Greg, I got to tell you, thank you for coming down.
Well, thanks for having me,
It
Morris.
was an honor and a pleasure, sir,
yeah.
to have you come down. But before we close, can you give us a number again that you gave
Sure.
us before?
There's actually two numbers. There's the 888 number. It's 888-283-3757, and then the Boston number is 617-973-8787. And if you have any questions, feel free to call in. If the students can't answer your questions, they'll refer you to the appropriate agency.
Right. Thank you for coming, and God bless you, Greg.
thanks for having
you do
me,
a
Morris.
fantastic job for the people of the Commonwealth.
Well, we
so thank
appreciate-
you again.
Thanks for having me.
Right, and I
Morris.
want to thank the people of Revere for listening, but most of all, I want to thank all our troops, wherever they are, in our great country, the United States of America. And until the next time, I hope we have another great guest like Mr. Gregory White. Thank you.
Thank you, Morris. Appreciate it.